Welcome to CARDESIGN.ACADEMY, and today I'm going to show you a technique that I use for taking a screenshot from a 3D CAD model and delivering a sort of a hand-rendered illustration or presentation level rendering of that interior. In this case, this is my interior concept for a futuristic off-road electric vehicle. This is something that would be very capable on a rock crawling trail or on the sand dunes at high speeds. And so a lot of this interior concept is based upon the architecture of this particular vehicle concept, in which you have a large battery pack running through a prominent center console spine shape, which forms the backbone of the interior tub. But because this vehicle doesn't have a traditional engine up front, the hood of the vehicle is extremely low, and the downward visibility is almost unlimited. And so the base of the windscreen is almost at the level of the driver's knees. And so there isn't a traditional instrument panel in the sense it's pushed way forward. So essentially the section of the A pillar wraps itself around the base of the windscreen and just forms a minimal structure from which a couple of square vents pop. And then the steering wheel and the gauge cluster and the steering column just sort of protrude from that back wall surface, and there's just the most minimal of a driving cockpits there. So as you can see, what I've done is I've taken the original data layer and I've made it quite transparent, and I'm doing a sort of a hand-sketched overlay using a thin pencil tool in Procreate. And so that alone goes a long way to delivering this very hand-sketched quality. Now I'm going into the detailing of the steering wheel and gauge cluster. So the steering wheel is, as you can see, is sort of a squircle shape. It's round on the sides but flattened on the top and bottom. And so by doing so, the top of the steering wheel again helps to keep the steering wheel below that line of sight, so that you have unparalleled visibility above the base of the windscreen. And then on the bottom of the steering wheel, it just provides more easier ingress-egress for the driver. And then the steering wheel is suspended by these very functional-looking L bracket shapes surrounding a hexagonal center hub. One of the prominent features in the color and material concept is a high contrast, where you have this overall basic tub of an interior and headliner, which is black, and then these trim panels which layer over it that are a much lighter color with a high contrast, and then highlighted by some bright red details which all have some sort of function to them. So you have like these prominent grab handles for the driver and all the passengers, so they have something to grab onto as this thing is bouncing around off-road. The red trim around the vents is another prominent area. And see, I'm just embellishing those details of the gauge cluster and the lower trim. One of the great things about working over a 3D model screenshot is that all of the hard work of perspective and getting the coordination of all of the different objects and elements, getting all of the light and shadow and all the color and materials, getting all of that worked out in advance really makes the job of delivering a presentation level rendering much easier. And it also allows you to deliver images of the same interior from multiple perspectives, knowing that they're all sort of correctly proportioned and correctly architectured. So now I've taken the data layer and I've brought it back to nearly full opacity. I'm keeping it at about 70%, but then I've now duplicated the layer so that I can add some additional contrast. So I'm keeping that layer at nearly full opacity. And then what I'm doing is I'm using the eraser tool to bring about some light and shadow in some of those areas that I want to highlight. For example, this structure that runs across the base of the windscreen and connects the A-pillars together, from which these two vents are mounted. And then you have the center spine emerging from that, this sort of center spine surface which houses the battery. And just highlighting the tops of the steering wheel. You get a better sense of shape, form, and dimension. You can see how in the cast shadow of the steering wheel onto the footwell, that was generated by the data. So in some of my previous demos, I hand sketched the shadows, and this time I used a different data rendering method to generate those shadows for me. So it made my job a lot easier. I'm still adding a few cast shadows in like these vent details as they project down onto the surface of the center console area, just to give it some added dimension. Just darkening up the insides of those vent holes. I'm just filling in the outside door surface. Actually, this vehicle has no doors. It's just the trim around the base of the A-pillar and the rocker. Now I'm taking my airbrush and I'm just adding a little bit more light onto the trim around the base of the rocker on the driver's side, just below the A-pillar. Now I'm adding just a little bit of fade of the background tone into the base of the windscreen, just to give the impression that that surface is turning itself up and towards the outside world. But then I'm just going ahead and erasing around those vents to bring them outward from that surface. Adding a little bit of extra light to the floor on the passenger side. Okay, so then I'm adding a new layer, and I'm going to use a noise brush. And what the noise brush does is it just adds a bit of texture to everything, and I like texture on an interior. It just gives everything a much more tactile, realistic quality. Takes it further away from looking like a computer-generated image. And as you can see, I'm just very lightly applying this texture brush over most of the surfaces that are getting light. Gives everything a much more tactile quality. Now I'm starting to go in with a black pencil and just highlighting and embellishing some of the secondary forms. For example, the surfaces of the red trim rings around the vents, and just giving those some added brightness and definition. And then you can see that they're housed by these forms which protrude from the main section running across the base of the windscreen. I'm just going in with a black pencil now and just adding a bit of shadow and definition to that, you know, give it the sense of like a beveled edge. It's very functional, machined quality. So then I'm going to grab a white pencil and start to add some subtle edging. This is to give the impression that there's another layer of dark material which is surrounding that trim ring and is just catching a bit of light in the corners. So now you can really see that form coming out of the main section that houses the vents. And I'm just kissing that edge, the leading edge of that surface with a white highlight. Putting a subtle white edge onto a hard edge surface, it just gives the impression that there's, oftentimes an edge will have a subtle radius to it which will catch a bit of light. So adding just that little hint of a white pencil across that edge will really help it to pop off the page. You just got to be careful how you do it. And then I'm just doing a bit of shading around the base of the A-pillar. And so the A-pillar section runs down and then kind of turns a corner and twists into this section that runs across the base of the windscreen and provides a sense of strength and structure, despite not having a very prominent instrument panel in the traditional sense. And then I'm just going in and embellishing the center gauge area, and it's sort of this pod that protrudes from the back wall, the firewall, and houses the gauges and the steering wheel. So now I'm just adding a bit more shine and a bit more dimension to the steering wheel itself, to the rim. And then the center hub of the steering wheel, which has this kind of hexagonal chiseled quality to it, framed by these 4 sort of L brackets which support the outer rim of the steering wheel. And I'm just adding some additional lighting to the center armrest using a white pencil. Then adding a bit of additional white pencil to the grab handles. And I just want to give them a little bit more of a faceted section so they don't look so tubular. They look a little more shaped and formed, maybe hydroformed. So you can see that very quickly with some simple techniques you can take the computer-generated look out of a 3D model screenshot and give it a nice rendered, illustrated quality, which gives it a lot of emotional appeal.